What is going on, everybody, and welcome back. Once again, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. I want to thank you for joining me for the first of what is going to be many of our faction-related videos. Now, of course, this is going to be a faction kind of breakdown video, but it's not going to be the same thing as what My Commander does in his channel, because he has his own thing, and he does that very well. Something that I want to do differently is also something that kind of directly responds to a lot of requests that I've had on the channel. And people want to see how to make an army composition and how to think about that. And I did that a little bit in my my guide to 0.95, but I think we could go into a little bit more detail focusing on specific factions, and I think that would be a really useful resource for people to use if they're just getting into the game. For example, a lot of attention that I put into things really goes towards getting people into the game and getting them interested and showing them how to play. So this is definitely going to be for people that are new-ish to the game, and maybe it will give some more veteran players ideas, or maybe they'll just see things that they don't like and avoid those in the future, and that'll be useful to them in that way. But in any case, the faction that we're going to be focusing on today is one of the evil factions. And that's going to be the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, who right now are a very strong faction, and they will be getting some changes in a small stat balancing patch that's going to be coming out. I know many of you are probably groaning about that, but it's pretty easy to install. Don't worry, there will be a very clear instruction booklet, and I'm going to be putting the notes for that patch in the description of this video. And this is going to deal solely with the stats. Now, there are some other things that will come out too, like Cave Trolls, for example, are getting a new model made by Crimson Bailey that's like super HD, and it's a beautiful thing, and they're getting the same treatment as some of the other troll units in the game have gotten so far. But my stat log is the ones that I make for when I'm doing stat stuff, so people can keep track, and the team can easily refer to them and when making changes to unit cards and things like that. And unit descriptions is what I mean. So without any further ado, let's take a look at the Misty Mountains roster. Now, this is going to be done on 13k funds, because that is what we have balanced the 0.95 and subsequent patches around, is a 13k budget. It's a good budget, gives you a fair amount of money to play around with. So the Misty Mountains, from what I have played with, and this is on, I believe, large settings, by the way, so this isn't huge. They're a little bit larger on huge, and I think most of their units tend to, like the Heavy Goblin Infantry, for example, tend to sit at about 250, so the max unit size. So if it's at 190, assume that it will be 253 with the officers and that sort of thing. But I digress. Misty Mountains really focuses around, at least in my experience and in a lot of games that I've played, a couple of things. One, their trolls and the fear effects that they can bring to bear. Their strong anti-cavalry bonuses in the form of their wargs, who are fairly cheap for what they can do. And their numbers. Misty Mountains really can come out with a lot of numbers, depending on how you want to build an army. Now, you can go very elite and very troll-heavy, and that will come out a little bit differently, as if you went for, say, an infantry-focused, kind of numbers-focused approach. And we're going to look at a few different builds today. So yeah, without any further ado, let's get right into it. Now, the things to note about the Misty Mountains is that, one, they can field a fair amount of trolls. They can, if they want, they can have 4 troll units on the field at the same time, and 2 of which will be fear-causing. The Cave Trolls have a little bit better numbers, and they're a little bit cheaper than a unit like the Snow Trolls, but they don't cause fear. But of course, they do make up for that with a little bit of numbers, and with being scary trolls just generally. But let's try a troll-heavy build, since I mentioned it. If you want it, you could bring the Snow Trolls, cause fear, by the way, a couple units of Cave Trolls, and the Troll Drummers are quite useful for keeping your units in line. I'm sure many of you know this, but in a very large radius around them, they give extra morale. I believe it's +5 morale. Yeah, it's right there in the tooltip for you. And they also cause fear, so a very, very powerful buff indeed. They are a little bit vulnerable to archers, and they are quite slow, mostly due to their marching animation. So there are some drawbacks to the unit, but yeah, definitely still useful. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that we're playing against a faction that we're expecting probably between 3 and 4 units of cavalry. So depending on how hard you want to go on the cavalry fight of things, you could bring upwards of 4 wargs, and you can mix and match a little bit here. So one of the things to note about 0.96 is that we overhauled the red prices, and now it's very standardized. I don't remember what it is for lower tiers. I think it's like 30% of the overall price for lower tiers, or 40% or something like that. But high tiers are 50% extra price when you go into the red, and bodyguard units tend to be about double. So they can be very, very expensive. But with that, there is wiggle room to dip into the red once and maybe twice, but you know, don't want to do it too much because you will end up crippling yourself with the extra cost. But yeah, there's some strategy there. So you can bring 3 units of Orcs here. Could be Bulks Champions, could be unit Orc Skirmishers if you're feeling particularly dangerous. You could use some Orc Skirmishers, but you'd have to kind of cheap out a little bit more on your infantry line if you wanted to do that. But let's say that we're bringing 3 Orcs for the sake of having a little bit more of a substantial infantry line than we otherwise would. The other thing to know about Misty Mountains is that they have quite low morale. So if you look at a lot of units here, 8 morale, some of the Snug I think are 6. Even the General's Bodyguard only has about 14. So that's definitely a big drawback to the Misty Mountains, is that they can be broken fairly easily, but like I said, they do have some options there, and the Troll Drummers are a big part of keeping their armies in the field for longer. Now, when it comes to infantry, let's say we're playing against a human faction. Let's say we're going to be going up against Arthedain, so they're going to have between 3 and 4 units of cavalry, including some knights. So in that case, I would actually bring another unit of Orc Skirmishers, and they're probably going to have some deadly pike units as well. So I'm going to want Bodyguard Fearmongers would be nice. A couple units of Halberds as well to support our front line. 3 units of Heavy Goblin Infantry, a couple units of Heavy Goblin Spears, and then we've got some options here. Now we could go with the Goblin Archers, who are 500 apiece. Now, if we're building this kind of army with 4 trolls, it's probably going to be a predominantly rush army. So instead of the Goblin Archers, just to give yourself a little bit more volume of fire and to give the enemy archers something to shoot at that is potentially very obnoxious, I would even take a couple units here of the Snug Skirmishers, and then you can fill out the rest of your line with some cheap Goblin Infantry as well that you can use to defend them. Now, the Goblin Infantry is kind of interesting. The first unit is free, the next unit, I believe, costs 150. And they can hide anywhere, so you can do a lot of things with these guys. And then you've got a little bit of money left over as well to do basically as you wish with. Now, you don't have a ton of reserves, which is which can potentially be a problem, but you do have some fairly hard-hitting units here, and you've definitely got a second line in the form of the Mighty Fearmongers, Heavy Goblin Halberds, and I've got some Goblin Infantry that you can use to defend your flanks alongside with your Heavy Goblin Spears, and some Javelin units in the center that you can use basically as needed. Now, if you're playing against Arthedain, of course you're going to want to have some anti-cavalry units as well, and the Orc Skirmishers can be very, very deadly. They're quite versatile, and mounted javelins in general got a nice accuracy buff in 0.96, which I realize we don't have a change log right now, but don't know if I mentioned that already, but yeah, you'll be able to see everything in the description of the video. And yeah, they're just generally a very valuable, very versatile unit that brings a lot of options when you bring them to the field. And the Warg Riders are, of course, very, very deadly. So we're going to want to upgrade the Warg Riders. And I would give the extra damage to the Cave Trolls. Now, let's see, where do we want to put our General? I would put him... You know, the Cave Trolls might not actually be the worst place for the General to be, just because that's a unit that's not going to be fighting on the front lines. We could put it in the White Uruk Fearmongers, but the White Uruk Fearmongers will be fighting on the front lines, and that's where you want them to be anyway. So, so yeah, in this case, the Troll Drummers probably aren't the worst choice for your General's Bodyguard. And as you can see, this is a very numerous army. It's a full 20 stack. We've got a lot of options here. The only thing that we're really lacking in is bowmen. So let's try a little bit more of a balanced approach to a Misty Mountains army. That was a very rush-focused army. It's kind of like do or die. You figure out if you're going to win within the first 10 minutes or so of the game. But let's try something a little bit more balanced, shall we say. Let's go with my favorite here. I really like bringing 4 Wargs, and I think it's pretty cost-effective, even with the extra price there tacked onto the Warg Skirmishers. But let's bring those units there. A few units of archers, reasonably balanced here. 1 or 2 units of the Black Uruks of the mountains. Now we're going to want to take, because these guys are getting a price increase to about 800, we're going to want to take about 150 out of our army comp here. So that would be 12,850. Just to keep things a little bit more accurate, so that I don't give you bad information and things like that. Heavy Goblin Spears are going to be limited to 3, so that's not a bad thing to have. And these guys, I think, are going up in price as well. So this will have to drop down another, I believe, 200 points. So there you go. Just to keep things a little bit more accurate. Which leaves us with 500. And me personally, I would bring a couple units of the Goblin Infantry. Just to kind of pad the roster there a little bit. You've got some nice reserves here in the form of the Black Orcs of the Mountain. You've got a fair amount of spears. You've got a lot of cavalry that you can use offensively or defensively, however strikes your fancy. You've got a nice elite unit here in the form of the Goblin King's Bodyguard, which is also going to inspire your units. And of course, you've got the Troll Drummers. Now, what this army does lack is trolls. But you do have to sacrifice a little bit if you want to bring like 4 cavalry. So if you wanted to get rid of the other unit of wargs and you wanted to instead bring a unit of maybe snow trolls or cave trolls, then that's something that you can totally do, and you'll still have money left over for upgrades and things like that, which you can assign at your leisure to whatever you feel is going to be worth it. So there we go. We have a rush army, we have a balanced army, and what other kind of armies will we really bring with the Misty Mountains? Now they do have a lot of fear effects. We could bring kind of a fear bombing army, which would probably look something like this. And have these units as your core. But you probably want this one to be a little bit more balanced as well. So a couple units of wargs there, maybe a 3rd unit of wargs just to kind of round things off a little bit, give you a little bit of extra cavalry options. And then I would bring some more Goblin Infantry. And I'd probably back those up with a couple units of the Heavy Goblin Halberds. I'm assuming that they will be in the center with the White Uruk Fearmonger, so I'm not going to bring a 3rd unit. And we'll save a little bit of money there. See, the Mountain Orc Berserkers can be useful in this kind of situation as well. A couple of units, maybe just 2 units of Goblin Archers would really be all you needed for this, because you will want to get into close quarters. So it's kind of like a rush army, but it's a little bit more built around some more support units. And then I would bring a couple units there of the Snog Skirmishers, 1 unit of Goblin Infantry just to fill out the rest of the roster. And again, you've got a nice little... It's a rush army, but it does have some more ranged options, so this would be something that might not be terrible to bring for a team fight, for example, just because of how many kind of different kinds of units you have here and how many situations that you're able to respond to reasonably. But let's see. One more army. Let's do one more. Let's try and get one that's very AP heavy. Let's assume that we're going to be going up against the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm, and there's not going to be a ton of cavalry, and it's just really going to be a bit of an infantry slog. So we'll take a couple units of Warg Riders, just to counter their melee cavalry, because you don't want to be completely cavalryless against anybody, really, in a field battle. And let's really work on the AP here. So I would bring a front line of Heavy Goblin Spears, who are all AP. Heavy Goblin Halberds to back them up. A couple of Mountain Orc Berserkers as well. And maybe we could drop one of those Goblin Halberds and instead go for some White Uruk Fearmongers, just so we get some Inspire going on our front line. And then a couple units of Cave Trolls would be really useful in that kind of situation. Archers, not so much. Bring some Snog Skirmishers in that kind of fight. Definitely going to be useful. And you've got the numbers really to just run them out of ammunition. So, yeah, probably bringing all this AP would be a really nice counter to the Dwarves. And let's see what else we got here. Those are the big choices, aren't they? We want a General's Bodyguard. So, now, normally the Blackback Mountain Berserkers are particularly useful because they can hide. But yeah, in this case I don't think it will be all that big of a deal. And they also cost... Oh yeah, we should update this, shouldn't we? This would be 12,900 because the Blackback Mountain Berserkers are actually going up by 100. So yeah, we'll update this a little bit more. Let's see. We really could just drown them in infantry. So a couple units of Goblin Infantry would be nice to have. But... This is where it gets kind of tricky. Do I want to go a little bit more for numbers? Or... I think numbers in this case would probably be a good thing to have. So let's bring a bunch of Heavy Goblin Infantry. And... what do you know? Another unit of Snaga Stalkers there as well, just to kind of round off the force. So there you have it, a very AP dwarf crushing army focused build. And yeah, that's really all the situations that I can think of at the moment. So if you guys enjoy this format, it's just kind of just me speaking freely and that sort of thing. Let me know if you prefer something a little bit more organized, maybe a little bit more cinematic. Then it's something that, of course, I can organize for you as well. But yeah, all you gotta do is let me know. But in any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys found this instructive, and I hope you'll join me again for whatever comes next. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.